They didn't expect anyone to still be alive, not after 5 winters, not in a place like that. The cabin stood crooked against the wind, half swallowed by trees, roof covered in a moss no one had seen before. No lights, no footsteps in the snow, no signal, no reason to look twice. And yet, they did. 3 officers, 1 body camera, 1 worn map with red X's scattered like dead stars. They'd been chasing an anonymous tip. Coordinates with no name, just 2 words, check here. They kicked the door open, wood snapped. The hinges cried out. Then, silence. Not silence like peace. Silence like something was holding its breath. The air inside didn't move, didn't want to. Dust hung mid-air like it was waiting for permission to fall. And in the middle of that cabin, barefoot, thin, hollow-eyed, stood a man no one expected to see again. Dorian Crest, declared legally dead 5 years ago. His clothes were draped over him like fabric on bone. His beard reached his chest. He blinked once, slow, like someone waking from a coma too deep to remember falling into, and then, without a twitch in his voice, without even looking at the officers, he said, "No one came for me, not even once." One of the younger officers stepped back. He didn't blink. The man didn't move, just dropped something to the floor. A notebook. Frayed, weather-stained, pages curled. The officers picked it up and opened to the middle, a list. All names, all familiar, all underlined, and all crossed out. Miles, Eve, Gerald, Isla, Leona, his family. The last page wasn't written in ink. It looked like blood. It read, "They failed, but I am still watching." And then he smiled, not wide, just enough to ask a question without saying anything at all. And one of the officers, the one who'd served in the Marines, took a step back and whispered, "What the hell is this?" But Dorian wasn't looking at them. He was looking past them, through them, and as the camera flickered and caught static, he muttered one last thing. This was never about disappearing. It was about what they'd do if I did. Then silence again. Only this time, it felt permanent. Before we continue, if you felt something shift inside you just now, pause. Because this is where most people scroll away, not because they're bored, but because deep down, they know they wouldn't pass the test either. If you believe loyalty is still worth something, tap the like button. If you want to know what people are really capable of when the money stops flowing, subscribe now and drop your location in the comments. We want to know where you're watching from. We always remember the quiet ones, before the cabin, before the disappearance, before the silence stretched into years. Dorian Crest was everywhere. You've seen his name on screens maybe without realizing it. Crest Technologies, one of the minds behind neural payment systems, the guy who said we'd never need passwords again. Some called him a genius, others called him paranoid. Both were right, but when his wife died, everything shifted. He stopped showing up to press events, started signing legal documents from a single red room in his mansion. No windows, no clocks, just a piano and a portrait of his daughter. Her name was Eve. She was 7 when her mother passed, 17 when Dorian disappeared. Dorian never remarried, never let strangers into his home. He believed in legacy, not bloodline, not even family. Legacy, the idea that you could build something so strong, so permanent, that even betrayal couldn't touch it. But here's what most people didn't know. The same week he disappeared, he'd quietly changed his will, stripped power from his legal team, reorganized the board of his company, wrote a series of letters that were never mailed, and transferred $5 billion into a trust that no one could access unless he was declared dead. His last public appearance? A graduation speech at a local community college. The speech lasted 4 minutes. He said one sentence that people thought was strange at the time. He looked out over the crowd, smiled faintly, and said, "Most of the people who claim to love you are just waiting for you to leave the room." He walked off stage and never spoke in public again. 2 weeks later, he was gone. The official story was that Dorian Crest left for a 3-day retreat, No assistance, no security, no family. He told his team he was going off-grid, said he needed solitude to finish his memoir. That was Friday, October 12th. By Sunday night, his car still hadn't returned. By Monday, the estate's cameras showed nothing. No departure, no arrival. Just static footage of a wrought iron gate that never opened. At first, no one panicked. He'd done things like this before, disappeared for 48 hours, 72. But by the fourth day, something didn't feel right. His private chef found his cell phone on the grand piano, still unlocked. Last message, unsent, typed out, blinking. If they ask, tell them to choose carefully. He never finished the sentence. There was no official goodbye, no email, no recorded will reading, only absence. The police were called. They searched the entire estate. No sign of forced entry, no signs of violence. But one thing stood out. His office, always meticulous, was stripped bare. No paper, no computers, no photos. Just one single object on the desk, a fountain pen, uncapped, resting in the center of an empty notebook. The ink had bled through the page, not in lines, not in writing. Just a spreading black bloom, like something had been written and then scrubbed away with time. It took 6 weeks for the headlines to catch on. Billionaire tech founder missing. Crest declared at risk. Where is Dorian? The board at Crest Technologies voted to freeze his assets. His children petitioned the court to declare him legally dead. Some said they were grieving. Others said they were planning. But here's the part that never made the papers. A single photograph appeared in the inbox of his old college roommate. No subject line, no message, no return address. It showed Dorian standing in the middle of a clearing, his back to the camera. Trees in the distance. No road, no sign of where. Just a handwritten caption at the bottom of the image. Now, let's see who waits. He was holding a matchstick in one hand, and what looked like a wedding ring in the other. The photo was time-stamped 5:47 a.m., October 13th, one day after he was last seen. If Dorian was your father, your brother, would you still be looking after week 2? Would you leave the porch light on for 5 years? Would you even notice the silence? Subscribe, because people like Dorian don't just disappear. They're erased. And if you're one of those watching without subscribing, drop a comment. Explain why. We're listening. Tell us where you're watching from. That part matters more than you think. Days turned into months, months into years, and in the silence Dorian left behind, people started showing their true faces. His estate, once a monument to order, began to rot. The marble steps cracked from neglect. The water in the fountain turned green, and every Friday, just before sunset, his mother lit the porch light. She never missed a Friday, even when she got sick, even when the city disconnected her power. The neighbors stopped asking questions. Reporters moved on. The board replaced his portrait in the company hall. But the family never quite settled. His son, Miles, grew sharper, colder, started wearing his father's cufflinks before the courts had ruled Dorian dead. He insisted it was a tribute. But during a shareholder meeting, someone overheard him say, "He always told me legacy was earned. Well, I'm earning it now." His daughter Eve told the media she wanted closure, said her father had been under immense pressure. Then, barely 6 months after his disappearance, she filed a petition to dissolve his philanthropic foundation, the one named after her mother. Some said it was grief, others said it was preparation. But what no one could explain were the letters. Once every 3 or 4 months, someone, somewhere, would receive a plain white envelope. No stamp, no name, just a message inside, typed, always the same font, always the same weight, never signed. Messages like, "They moved on too fast. Don't believe what they tell you. The quiet ones are the ones you should worry about." One letter arrived at the law office handling his estate. It was postmarked from Nunavut in northern Canada. The inside was smeared with tree resin. There was no writing, just a burned fingerprint, pressed into the center of the paper. Later analysis matched the print. It was Dorian's. But by then, no one wanted to find him anymore. The board had replaced him. The family had restructured his will, and the world had already moved on. Except for a few people. A janitor at his old school said he saw someone watching from behind the auditorium, tall, bearded, wearing Dorian's favorite coat. He only saw the man once, but swore he was holding a notebook, just watching. A park ranger in Quebec reported someone had been living off-grid, used handmade snares, left no trash, but carved the same word into the bark of every tree they passed: loyalty. And a hiker near the Arctic Circle submitted a blurry photo to a conspiracy forum. It showed a distant figure walking across the tundra. There was something unnatural about the posture. One hand hanging too low, the other clutching a small metal object that glinted in the snow. They zoomed in. It was a pocket watch. Dorian's, the same one he was given on his wedding day. The inscription, half visible in the photo, said, "Time will tell who stands still." Every Friday that porch light stayed on, for 5 years. She waited, alone. No press, no family, no closure. The world moved on. But she didn't. And maybe neither should you. Subscribe now, if only for the people we leave behind. And if you don't think it's worth it, comment below. Tell us why you didn't click the red button. And seriously, where are you watching from? Because these stories reach certain places for a reason. The letter came without warning. No return address, no explanation. Just a single typed message delivered to the sheriff's department in rural Alberta. You'll find what you lost in the woods. Attached were coordinates, latitude, longitude, no road access, no structures marked on satellite, nothing but forest, dense, untouched, cold. They didn't send a task force, just a team of 3, a deputy, a wildlife officer, and a retired Mountie who still responded to strange things. It took them 11 hours by snowmobile, 3 more on foot, and what they found wasn't listed on any map. The cabin was wrong, not in size, not in shape, but in feel. The kind of structure that looks like it shouldn't still be standing, but is, as if it was never built, just always there. No electricity, no chimney smoke, no footprints in the snow, even though it hadn't snowed in 4 days. And yet, when they forced open the door, there he was. Dorian Crest. His beard had grown to his chest. His eyes were clouded, not blind, but not entirely seeing. He wasn't afraid, wasn't startled, wasn't even curious. He looked at the men like they were late. He didn't ask who they were, didn't ask why they came. He just reached to the floor, picked up a piece of wood, and began tracing shapes into the dirt. Symbols, not words, not letters. They didn't recognize any of it. Spirals, loops, then jagged lines through the center, like something had been broken, then bound again. He did this for 20 minutes, didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't shiver, though the inside of the cabin was below freezing. When one of the officers finally spoke, Dorian looked up and said quietly, "The only ones who stayed were the ones who never said they would." They asked where he'd been. He didn't answer. They asked why he left. Still nothing. They asked if he'd been alone. That's when he stopped moving, looked down at the dirt, traced the same symbol 3 more times, then said, "Alone? No, never alone." That was the problem. They tried to take photos. Their body cams began to glitch. The files would later show static where Dorian stood. Even the thermal scans failed to register his body heat, but he was there. They felt him there. At one point, he reached for the lantern, blew it out. Total darkness. Only then did he whisper, "If the lights stay on, it sees you. If you stop remembering, it follows you. And if you come looking, it doesn't forget." They turned on flashlights. He didn't flinch. He just smiled, tired, like he'd been awake for years. And in that moment, The wildlife officer noticed something written in faint chalk on the cabin wall behind him. 7 names, not carved, not painted, just written once, then smeared by hand. The last one, barely legible, Miles. They asked if he was ready to come home. He paused, then said, "Home is what you test, not what you trust." They didn't argue. They wrapped him in thermal blankets, carried him out, didn't speak the entire way down the mountain, and in the report filed that evening, the deputy didn't write a conclusion. He just left the last line blank, only one word. Returned. But returned from what? No one could answer that, not even Dorian. They thought it was over, that finding Dorian meant closing the file, tucking away the strange details, and letting the media write their sanitized ending. But Dorian had other plans. 3 days after his return, he requested a meeting with the officers who found him. No lawyers, no doctors, just a map, drawn by hand, old paper, charcoal, fingers stained like he'd drawn it dozens of times. He said only one thing: "Take me back. There's more." They didn't want to. They'd already stretched the budget, already buried the strange reports. But the department quietly approved it. No press, no escort, just Dorian and 2 men with quiet faces. They went north, farther than the cabin, beyond where any marked trails ended. He didn't speak during the journey, didn't eat, didn't ask questions. And when they reached a ridge wrapped in ice, he simply stopped, pointed down into a gully no one had noticed on the satellite scans. No signal, no animals, not even wind. They climbed down. It took 2 hours. The ground changed color. Rocks became black, not dark, but black, like burned paper. And at the base of the ravine, they found it. A mouth, not a tunnel, not a cave. A mouth, rough-hewn rock, shaped like jaws parted just enough to crawl through. It breathed cold air, not wind, breath. Dorian didn't enter. He stood at the threshold, traced a shape in the dirt with his foot, and whispered, "I never went in. It came out." The officers entered. Only one had a flashlight. They recorded 27 minutes of footage. None of it made sense. Inside the cave they found bones. Not animal, not recent. Stacked in a spiral, surrounding a stone basin. Markings were etched into the wall. Old symbols, curved and looping, the same ones Dorian had scratched into the cabin floor. And at the far end, a wall smeared with handprints. Child-sized, dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one pressed hard, as if trying to push in, not out. One of the officers dropped his flashlight. It didn't make a sound when it hit the ground. The video ended there. When they came out, neither spoke. One vomited. The other went silent for 6 days. The older one, the former Mountie, resigned the next morning. No explanation, just left his badge, his keys, and a note that said, "There's something in the trees that never learned to die." The footage was reviewed once, then locked away. The department filed the report under unsubstantiated. But in their private records, a single line was added in red ink: "Do not return, no further contact, avoid visual recall." Dorian never asked to go back. He stopped speaking altogether after that. But he kept drawing. Every wall in the facility, filled with chalk markings, same shapes, same loops, same slash across the center, over and over, always ending with one phrase: "Only the forgotten stay safe." This isn't a horror story, it's a record, and every time a government seals away evidence, every time someone resigns quietly, that's when you should start paying attention. Subscribing to this channel isn't entertainment, it's resistance. If you're fine with secrets, stay silent, don't subscribe. But if something inside you says there's more to this, click that red button and tell us where you're watching from. We read everything, and you're not the only one watching. You might think Dorian was hallucinating. Trauma, isolation, maybe something snapped. But here's what they won't tell you: he wasn't the first. Not even close. 2 years before Dorian vanished, a group of hikers reported strange sounds near that same mountain. They described it as whispering, but not in any language, not wind, not echo, just syllables that didn't match any human throat. One girl said it felt like her thoughts were being pulled out, like someone was breathing her memories in reverse. That group turned around, all except one, a young man named Isaac Glenn. They found his tent 4 days later, torn from the inside. No blood, no tracks, just a journal. Inside, sketches, circles, a spiral filled with handprints. One entry, "If I forget my name, I survive." Authorities never connected that case to Dorian Crest, but internet forums did, private boards, paranormal archives that most people dismiss. They started calling it the threshold effect. The idea that there are places in this world, not haunted, but aware. Places that don't want you dead. They want you remembered, so they can use your memory as a key. Some believe Dorian stumbled into one of those places. Others think he was invited. Because here's the part that never made the news. A week before Dorian's disappearance, someone accessed his company's master servers remotely. No password, no login trace, just a download. One file, only one. It was labeled Genesis DRN 0x29. No one knew what it meant. Until someone ran the file through a waveform decoder. It wasn't data, it was sound. Exactly 1 minute and 34 seconds of layered frequencies. You couldn't hear it with normal ears, but when slowed down, it matched the same whispering the hikers had recorded 2 years earlier. A rhythm, a chant. Not quite music, not quite voice. And embedded deep in the waveform, like a watermark, were visual glyphs. The same glyphs Dorian etched into his walls, into his cabin, into the dirt beneath his feet. People say this is just internet myth, that it's fiction. But no one ever explained the funding trail, because a private security firm in Eastern Europe, one with ties to Cold War intelligence, received an anonymous wire transfer for exactly $5 billion 1 month after Dorian's death. Same day the trust was triggered, same signature key as the Genesis file, same glyph embedded in the memo line of the transaction. So either this was the most expensive prank in history, or Dorian wasn't testing his family for loyalty. He was testing humanity for memory. Because here's what he said to the nurse 2 days before he stopped speaking for good. "It's not about who forgets you. It's about what remembers you." You've made it this far. You've seen enough to know this wasn't an accident. So don't pretend this is just a story. If you're not subscribed by now, ask yourself, what are you afraid of finding? Hit that button. And in the comments, tell us what part of this feels wrong to you. Because if you stay quiet, you might not be the only one who forgets. You might be the one who gets remembered by them. In the end, no body was ever found, no official death certificate ever signed, and yet, every legal channel accepted that Dorian Crest was gone. Willingly, his estate was divided. His name quietly removed from the board. Obituaries ran with photos from 10 years ago, as if the present version of him had already been erased long before he ever disappeared. The family moved on, some faster than others. His youngest son never spoke again. His daughter, Ivy, changed her name, and for years no one mentioned the cabin. Until one winter, a private rescue team, unrelated, unpaid, sent a drone through the ridge trails, not for Dorian, but for a missing tourist. The footage showed something no one expected. The cabin was still standing, but the front door was wide open, snow untouched on the stairs, as if no one had left in days or as if someone was still watching. Inside the main room, no furniture, no fireplace, just one thing on the floor, a mirror, shattered, but not randomly. Each shard was laid out carefully, symmetrical, face up, each reflecting something that wasn't in the room. On one shard, you could see the outline of a man sitting in a chair. On another, a child's face, smiling, though there was no child present. And on the largest piece, dead center, Dorian Crest's reflection, looking straight at the camera. Not aged, not altered, just unchanged. The footage cut out seconds later. The drone never returned. And when investigators tried to revisit the coordinates, the entire clearing was gone, replaced by dense forest. No path, no opening. Like the cabin had never been there. Like it only appeared for those who had already been chosen. You want a final twist? Here it is. 6 months ago, someone tried to use Dorian's signature key to access a hidden account. One login attempt, one failed password, but that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that the location of the attempt was traced to a device that had been destroyed in a fire 11 years ago. Dorian's original laptop, the one he used to build Genesis, the one he buried under 6 feet of concrete. So maybe he never left, maybe he was never trapped. Maybe he became something else, a signal, a cipher, a message too complex for language. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a test for his family after all. It was a warning. For you. Before you sleep tonight, ask yourself, if Dorian Crest showed up at your door, not aged, not dead, just waiting, what would you say to him? Don't just watch. Don't just vanish like the others. Subscribe before you forget that you ever heard this story. Or worse, before this story remembers you. And if you won't subscribe, at least have the courage to explain why in the comments below. We'll be watching. Just like he is.